Code, to write instructions for a computer in a programming language. Developers code applications using Python and JavaScript. Program, to create software by writing and structuring code. She learned to program in C++ during college. Develop, to build, improve, or expand software applications. The team is developing a new mobile app for e-commerce. Compile, to transform source code into machine code that can be executed. The C++ program failed to compile due to a syntax error. Execute, to run a program or command. Clicking the button will execute the script. Debug, to find and fix errors in a program. He spent hours debugging the issue in the payment system. Declare, to define a variable, function, or data type in a program. In JavaScript, you can declare a variable using let or const. Define, to specify the meaning or structure of a function, variable, or class. The function is defined to take two parameters and return their sum. Initialize, to assign an initial value to a variable or object. Before using the array, we need to initialize it with values. Analyze, to examine data or code systematically to understand patterns, errors, or performance. The team analyzes user behavior to improve the recommendation algorithm. Normalize, to standardize data to ensure consistency and efficiency. The database normalizes user input to prevent redundancy. Implement, to put a plan, decision, or system into action and make it work. The company implemented a new security system to protect user data. Instantiate, to create an instance of an object in object-oriented programming. You need to instantiate a class before calling its methods. Override, to redefine a method in a subclass that was originally defined in a parent class. In Java, we override the toString method to customize object output. Optimize, to improve performance, efficiency, or resource usage of code. The developer optimized the database queries to reduce loading time. Encrypt, to convert data into a secure format to prevent unauthorized access. The password is encrypted before being stored in the database. Decrypt, to convert encrypted data back into its original form. The system decrypts the received message using a private key. Validate, to check if data or input meets certain criteria. The form validates email addresses before submission. Verify, to confirm the accuracy, security, or validity of data or actions. The application verifies user credentials before granting access. Refactor, to improve existing code structure without changing its behavior. He refactored the function to make it more readable and efficient. Integrate, to combine different software components or systems into one. They integrated a third-party payment gateway into the e-commerce platform. Catch, to intercept an exception or error during program execution. The try-catch block is used to catch runtime errors in Java. Handle, to process and respond to errors, inputs, or system events. The API should handle invalid requests gracefully. Fail to stop working correctly due to an error. The authentication process will fail if incorrect credentials are provided. Crash to unexpectedly stop functioning, often due to an error. The app crashes when you press the Submit button twice. Terminate to forcefully end a process or program. The system automatically terminates unresponsive applications. Log to record events, errors, or messages in a system log. All login attempts are logged for security reasons. Monitor to observe and track system performance or activity. The software monitors CPU usage to prevent overheating. Track to follow or record changes over time. The analytics tool tracks user activity on the website. Recover to restore lost or corrupted data. The backup system helps recover data after accidental deletion. Rollback to revert changes to a previous state. If the deployment fails, the system will automatically roll back the update. Store to save data in memory, a database, or a file system. User preferences are stored in a configuration file. Retrieve to get data from a database or storage location. The system retrieves customer details from the database. Save to write data to storage permanently. Make sure to save your progress before closing the application. Load to read data into memory for use. The game loads saved settings when it starts. Fetch to request and receive data from a remote source. The browser fetches resources from the server using HTTP requests. Parse to analyze and extract structured data from input. The program parses JSON data received from the API. Process to handle and manipulate data for a specific purpose. The system processes customer orders in real time. Compute to perform calculations or operations on data. The AI model computes predictions based on input data. Sort to arrange data in a specific order. The database sorts customer records by last name. Merge to combine multiple datasets or files into one. The developer merged two branches in Git. Filter to remove unwanted data based on specific criteria. The search results can be filtered by date or relevance. Index to create a reference structure to improve search efficiency. The database indexes columns to speed up queries. Hash to generate a fixed-length value from data for security or indexing. Passwords are hashed before being stored in the database. Map to associate each element in a dataset with a corresponding output. The function maps user IDs to their corresponding email addresses. Reduce to aggregate data into a single value using a function. The algorithm reduces a list of numbers to their total sum. Aggregate to summarize and group data for analysis. The dashboard aggregates daily sales figures into monthly reports. Query: to request specific data from a database. The SQL query retrieves all users who registered in the last month. Update: to modify existing data in a database. The system updates user profiles when they change their information. Modify: to change data, configurations, or files. The administrator modified the server settings. Delete: to remove data permanently from a system. Old logs are deleted after 30 days to save space. Connect: to establish a link between two systems or devices. The app connects to the database using an API. Disconnect: to terminate an established connection. The session disconnects after 10 minutes of inactivity. Transmit: to send data from one point to another. The server transmits encrypted messages to clients. Receive: to accept incoming data from another system. The client receives the requested file from the server. Download: to transfer a file from a remote system to a local device. Users can download reports from the website. Upload: to send a file from a local device to a remote server. Customers upload their profile pictures to the platform. Stream: to continuously send and play media content in real time. The service allows users to stream videos without downloading them. Ping: to send a test signal to check network connectivity. The administrator pinged the server to check if it was online. Resolve: to convert a domain name into an IP address. DNS resolves example.com to its corresponding IP address. Redirect: to forward a user or request to a different location. Old URLs are redirected to the new website version. Block: to prevent access or communication. The firewall blocks traffic from untrusted sources. Allow: to grant permission for access or actions. Only authorized users are allowed to edit the document. Authenticate: to verify a user's identity before granting access. The system authenticates users using two-factor authentication. Authorize: to grant specific permissions after authentication. Admins are authorized to modify system settings. Exploit: to take advantage of a security flaw. Hackers exploit vulnerabilities in outdated software. Patch: to fix a vulnerability or bug in a system. The company released a security patch to fix the bug. Scan: to examine a system for security threats or vulnerabilities. The antivirus scans files for malware. Detect: to identify potential threats or issues. The intrusion detection system detects suspicious activity. Intrude: to gain unauthorized access to a system. Hackers attempted to intrude into the corporate network. Mitigate: to reduce the impact or risk of a threat. The security team mitigated the attack by isolating affected servers. Render, to generate and display content on the screen. The browser renders the web page using HTML and CSS. Style, to apply visual designs using CSS. The developer styled the buttons with rounded corners. Align, to arrange elements in a structured manner. The text is aligned to the center using CSS properties. Hover, to place the cursor over an element without clicking. When you hover over the button, it changes color. Click, to press and release a mouse button on an element. Click the Submit button to send your form. Scroll, to move up or down within a web page or application. Users can scroll down to see more content. Toggle, to switch between two states. Clicking the menu icon toggles the navigation bar. Expand, to make an element larger or more visible. The drop-down menu expands when clicked. Collapse, to shrink or hide an expanded element. Clicking outside the menu collapses it. Resize, to change the dimensions of an element or window. The image is automatically resized to fit the screen. Test, to check if code or a system works as expected. Developers test new features before deployment. Inspect, to examine code or elements in the developer tools. You can inspect a web page using the browser's dev tools. Assert, to verify that a condition holds true during testing. Unit tests assert that functions return the expected results. Simulate, to mimic real-world conditions for testing purposes. The software simulates multiple users logging in at once. Emulate, to replicate the behavior of another system or device. Developers emulate mobile devices to test responsiveness. Benchmark, to measure performance and compare it to a standard. The app's speed was benchmarked against competitors. Compare, to analyze differences between outputs, versions, or performance metrics. The QA team compares new and old versions to track improvements. Measure, to quantify performance, load times, or efficiency. Google Lighthouse measures page performance scores. Fail, to not meet expected conditions or break during testing. The test failed because the function returned an incorrect value. Pass, to successfully meet the expected conditions in a test. If all unit tests pass, the code is ready for deployment. Deploy, to release and run software on a server or cloud environment. The team deploys new updates every Friday. Scale, to adjust system capacity based on demand. The application scales automatically during high traffic periods. Provision, to allocate computing resources such as servers or databases. We provisioned additional cloud instances to handle the load. Configure, to set up a system, software, or hardware for operation. The database is configured to accept remote connections. Automate, to create scripts or processes that run without manual intervention. We automated backups to run every night. Schedule, to plan and execute tasks at specific times. The server reboots are scheduled every Sunday at midnight. Sync, to keep multiple systems, databases, or devices in agreement. The Calendar app syncs across all devices in real time. Backup, to create a copy of data for recovery purposes. It's important to back up critical files daily. Restore, to recover lost or corrupted data from a backup. The IT team restored the database after the system crash. Shutdown, to power down or stop a system. The server shuts down automatically during maintenance. Refine, to improve and optimize a system or codebase. Developers refine the algorithm to enhance performance. Inject, to insert dependencies or data into a system. Dependency injection helps manage service instances efficiently. Override, to replace or modify an inherited method in programming. The subclass overrides the parent method to add new behavior. Simulate, to model or replicate a process or behavior for testing purposes. The software simulates high traffic loads to test server performance. Extend, to add functionality to an existing class or module. The framework allows developers to extend built-in components. Convert, to change data from one format to another. The tool converts CSV files into JSON format. Encode, to transform data into a specific format. User passwords are encoded for security purposes. Decode, to reverse encoding and retrieve the original data. The system decodes the token to authenticate the user. Serialize, to convert an object into a storable or transferable format. The API serializes the response into JSON format. Deserialize, to reconstruct an object from its serialized form. The application deserializes incoming XML data into objects. Throttle, to limit the rate of requests or resource usage. The API throttles requests to prevent overload. Mount, to attach a storage device or file system to the operating system. When you plug in a USB drive, the computer mounts it so you can open and use the files inside. Unmount, to detach a mounted file system or storage device. Always unmount USB drives before disconnecting them. Allocate, to assign resources like memory or processing power. The system dynamically allocates RAM to active applications. Limit, to impose a maximum constraint on resources or operations. The API limits requests to prevent abuse. Spoof, to falsify data, such as an IP address or email sender. Attackers spoof emails to perform phishing attacks. Eavesdrop, to secretly intercept and monitor network communication. Hackers can eavesdrop on unencrypted Wi-Fi connections. Penetrate, to gain unauthorized access to a system. Penetration testers try to penetrate corporate networks to find weaknesses. Compromise, to expose or weaken a system's security. The database was compromised due to weak encryption. Trigger, to start a process automatically. A new commit triggers the build pipeline. Queue, to add tasks or processes to a waiting list. The job is queued for deployment. Poll, to repeatedly check for updates or responses at regular intervals. The client application polls the server every 5 seconds for new messages. Fork, to create a separate version of a repository. Developers fork open-source projects to customize them. Merge, to combine code changes from different branches. The feature branch was successfully merged into the main branch. Exceed, to surpass a defined limit or threshold. The server load exceeded the allowed capacity, causing downtime. Overload, to place excessive demand on a system. Too many concurrent requests overloaded the database. Consume, to use system resources such as CPU, memory, or bandwidth. The application consumes too much memory during execution. Allocate, to assign specific resources for a process. The system allocates 2 GB of RAM for each virtual machine. Limit, to set a restriction on resource usage. The API limits users to 1,000 requests per hour. Broadcast, to send data to all devices in a network. The server broadcasts updates to all connected clients. Transmit, to send data over a network. Data packets are transmitted securely via SSL encryption. Cache, to temporarily store frequently used data for faster retrieval. The website caches images to speed up page loading times. Compress, to reduce the size of data files for efficient storage or transmission. The system compresses log files to save disk space. Decompress, to restore compressed data back to its original state. The archive needs to be decompressed before installation. Route, to determine the path data should take. The router efficiently routes traffic between networks. Generate, to create data, logs, or code dynamically. The system generates unique IDs for each user. Release, to make software, an update, or a product available for users. The company released a new version of the app with bug fixes and new features. Run, to execute a program, command, or script. To install the software, you need to run the setup file. Reboot, to restart a computer or system, usually to apply updates or fix issues. After installing the update, You need to reboot your computer for the changes to take effect.
Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.